I found a secret trust fund my wife created for her boyfriend's unborn child. It started with a misplaced charging cable. Sarah, my wife, is meticulous, almost to a fault. Everything has its place, every bill is filed, every appointment locked. So when I couldn't find my phone charger in the usual spot on my nightstand, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of annoyance registered. I checked her side, then the dresser, then the living room. Nothing. Frustrated, I wandered into her home office, a place I rarely go unless invited. It's her sanctuary of order, filled with neatly stacked files, color-coded binders, and a desktop computer I've only ever seen her use for work. Her laptop, however, was open on the desk, a soft glow emanating from the screen. I figured the charger might be plugged in behind it, a common culprit for the disappearing act. As I reached around, my hand brushed against a stack of papers. Not work papers. These looked more like personal documents. My brow furrowed. Curiosity, a beast I usually keep leashed, began to stir. I nudged the paper slightly, just enough to see what was underneath. A plain manila folder, unlabeled. My heart did a strange little skip. It wasn't Sarah's style to leave things unlabeled, especially anything important. Before you dive too deep into this story, I want to be real with you for a second. If you're finding yourself drawn into this raw, honest kind of narrative, the kind that pulls you in and doesn't let go, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It's down there, that little red one. And while you're at it, give this a thumbs up if it resonates. Share it with someone who might appreciate this kind of unfiltered truth, and definitely leave a comment. Let me know what you think, what you feel. Your engagement helps us keep these stories coming. Now, back to me and Sarah. I hesitated. This was Sarah's space, her private world. But the charger was still missing, and the mystery of the folder was like a tiny, persistent itch. I picked it up. It felt surprisingly heavy. The top sheet wasn't a document, it was a bank statement. A very specific kind of bank statement from a financial institution I'd never heard of. The name was something like Evergreen Wealth Management. My hands started to feel a little clammy. I unfolded it further. The name on the account wasn't Sarah's. It wasn't mine. It was a man's name, Daniel Hayes. My stomach clenched. Who the hell was Daniel Hayes? Sarah and I have been married for 12 years. 12 years of shared mortgages, PTA meetings, Sunday dinners with my parents, and meticulously planned vacations. We built a life, brick by brick, in a quiet suburb outside of Chicago. White picket fence, 2 cars in the driveway, a golden retriever named Buster who's basically our fur child. Our life is comfortable. Predictable maybe, but comfortable. Sarah is a senior marketing executive for a major firm.
She works hard, travels a lot for business, but she's always been the anchor, the planner, the one who remembers birthdays and anniversaries, the one who keeps our world spinning smoothly. I'm a graphic designer, mostly freelance, which gives me a bit more flexibility. I handle the school pickups, the grocery runs, the weekend projects around the house. It's a partnership, or at least that's what I've always believed. I kept unfolding the statement. It was dated from last month. The balance was astronomical. Enough money to buy our house 10 times over. And beneath the balance, a list of transactions. Most were transfers, large sums going out. But then I saw it, a recurring deposit. Every month, on the same day, a significant amount of money was being deposited into this Daniel Hayes account. The source of the deposit was listed as Sarah M. Peterson, Personal Funds. Peterson is Sarah's maiden name. My breath hitched. This wasn't a business transfer. This was personal. The next document in the folder was a letter. It was typed on the same Evergreen Wealth Management letterhead. The recipient was Daniel Hayes. I scanned the opening lines, my eyes blurring slightly. It was a confirmation of a new account, detailing the initial deposit and setting up the recurring contributions. It mentioned the beneficiary. My blood ran cold. The beneficiary wasn't Daniel Hayes. It was listed as Baby Hayes, Unborn. An unborn child. My wife was creating a trust fund for an unborn child of a man I'd never heard of. Daniel Hayes. The name echoed in my head, a discordant chime against the backdrop of our quiet suburban life. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This couldn't be real. Sarah? My Sarah? The woman who meticulously color-codes her spice rack? The woman who still calls me every afternoon when she's traveling for work just to say she loves me? I frantically sifted through the folder. There were more statements, each detailing the same pattern. Then, at the very bottom, tucked away like a guilty secret, was a single, folded sheet of paper. It was a printed email. The sender was Sarah. The recipient was Daniel Hayes. The subject line read, "Confirmation and next steps." I read the email, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the paper steady. It was clinical, professional almost. Sarah detailing the terms of the trust, ensuring the funds would be managed for the child's future education and well-being. She mentioned regular updates, designated guardians if something were to happen to both her and Daniel. And then my gaze landed on a specific sentence, a sentence that felt like a physical blow. "I know this is a lot to handle, Daniel, but I want to make sure our son has every opportunity, no matter what the future holds for us." Son, our son. The world tilted. The neatly organized office, the framed photos on the shelf of Sarah and me smiling at our wedding, Buster's goofy face on the desk, it all seemed to warp and distort.
Our son. Sarah was having a son with Daniel Hayes, and she was setting up a trust fund for him. How long had this been going on? How long had she been living this double life? The business trips, the late nights at the office, the occasional faraway look in her eyes? Was it all a lie? Was she meeting him? Was she in love with him? The thought was a searing brand on my soul. I sank into Sarah's desk chair, the smooth leather suddenly feeling cold and alien. The charger was forgotten. The entire world I thought I knew had just imploded. I looked at the email again, tracing the words with a trembling finger. Our son. The possessive pronoun, so casually dropped, so devastatingly final. It wasn't just a child. It was their child. A child that was apparently being conceived or born during the 12 years Sarah and I had been building our life together. My mind raced, trying to piece together fragments of conversations, of memories. Had there been times when she seemed distant? Times when she was unusually stressed? I'd always attributed it to work. Sarah's job was demanding, I knew that. But now I saw it all through a different lens. Every late night, every rescheduled weekend, every hushed phone call she took in another room. Were they all for him? For their son? The financial details were one thing. The cold, hard cash was shocking enough. But the words in that email, they cut deeper than any amount of money. Our son. It implied a shared history, a shared future, a shared love. A love that had apparently bypassed me entirely. I pulled out my phone, not to call her, but to search. Daniel Hayes. It was a common name, I knew that. But maybe there would be something. I typed it into Google, my thumbs fumbling. A few Daniel Hayeses popped up, a lawyer in Texas, a professor in Ohio. And then a LinkedIn profile. Daniel Hayes, Senior Project Manager at Sterling Corp. Sterling Corp, that was a competitor of Sarah's company. Not a direct rival, but they operated in the same industry. And Sarah had mentioned recently that Sterling was poaching talent, trying to lure away her top people. I clicked on the profile. The picture was of a man with kind eyes and a slight smile. He looked normal, approachable, definitely not the kind of person I'd imagined when I first saw his name. The profile listed his tenure at Sterling Corp, his education, his professional accomplishments. And then I saw it, a small section under personal. It stated he was married to Jessica Hayes and had 2 daughters. Married. He was married. The revelation didn't bring relief. It brought a fresh wave of confusion and a sick, churning anger. So, Sarah wasn't just betraying me. She was involved with a married man. Was Jessica Hayes aware of this? Was Sarah aware of Jessica Hayes? The questions piled up, each one more agonizing than the last. This wasn't a simple affair. This was a tangled, sordid mess. I kept scrolling through Daniel Hayes' LinkedIn. I noticed he'd recently changed his profile picture. It was the same man, but there was a subtle difference. He looked happier in the older picture. The new one had a faint shadow of weariness around his eyes. And then I saw a post he'd made a few months ago. A generic post about the unexpected joys of fatherhood. He'd tagged his wife, Jessica, and included a picture of their 2 young daughters. No mention of a son. No mention of an unborn child. Was this a recent development? Was Sarah the reason Daniel Hayes was looking so weary? Was he caught in the middle? Or was he actively participating in this deception, juggling two families? The possibilities were dizzying, and none of them offered any comfort. I looked back at Sarah's email. I want to make sure our son has every opportunity. Every opportunity. It was so altruistic, so Sarah. Except it was for another man's child, a child that was apparently hers too, conceived in secret. The duplicity was breathtaking. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I needed to see the rest of the folder. My hands were still trembling as I reached for it again. There were more documents. A copy of Sarah's driver's license. A copy of Daniel Hayes' driver's license. And then the document that made my stomach churn with a mixture of horror and a bizarre, twisted kind of understanding. It was a prenatal screening report for Sarah, dated 3 months ago. The results were positive. Positive for a male fetus. The name listed as the father, Daniel Hayes. My world went silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the ticking of the clock on the wall, it all faded away. There was just the pounding in my ears, the rush of blood, the image of Sarah's face, serene and content, superimposed over this cold clinical report. She was pregnant. She was pregnant with Daniel Hayes' child, and she was planning for its future, her future, without me. She had built this entire financial safety net, this secret life, and I had been completely oblivious. Every kiss, every embrace, every whispered "I love you." Was it all a lie? Was she thinking of Daniel, of their son during those moments? I sank back into the chair, my head in my hands. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal was almost too much to bear. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a complete dismantling of our shared reality. She had created a future for herself, a life with another man and their child, all while presenting me with the illusion of our life together. The trust fund, the prenatal report, it wasn't a sign of her wanting to confess or make amends. It was a sign of her absolute certainty that this new life was happening, whether I was a part of it or not. I looked at the planner on Sarah's desk, its pages filled with neat appointments. Tomorrow's entry read, 9 a.m., dentist appointment. I wondered if she'd even gone to that dentist appointment. Or had she been somewhere else? Somewhere with Daniel.
The questions were relentless, a torrent of doubt and pain. I had to know more. I had to understand. My fingers, still numb, went back to the folder. I sifted through the remaining papers, desperate for any clue, any explanation, any shred of understanding. I found a small, sealed envelope addressed to Sarah. It was from Evergreen Wealth Management. My heart leaped into my throat. I tore it open. Inside was a single handwritten note. It was short, to the point, and chillingly vague. Dear Sarah, we understand the unique circumstances. Please be assured that all arrangements are being handled with the utmost discretion, as per your instructions. We wish you and your family all the best. My family. The word twisted in my gut. My family was Sarah, me, and Buster, or so I thought. This note confirmed that Sarah had been actively orchestrating this, making arrangements, ensuring discretion. She hadn't stumbled into this. She had planned it meticulously, just like everything else in her life. I leaned back, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me. The trust fund, the unborn child, the married man, the clandestine arrangements. It was a perfect storm of betrayal, and I was caught right in the eye of it. I looked at the photo on her desk again, a picture of us laughing on a beach during a vacation years ago. It felt like a ghost, a relic of a life that no longer existed. The charger was still missing, but it didn't matter anymore. The only thing missing now was the Sarah I thought I knew, the life we were supposed to be building together. And the questions were just starting to gnaw at me, deep and relentless. What was I going to do? How could I ever face her? And most importantly, what did this mean for my own future? The silence in the office was deafening, filled only by the echoes of a shattered reality. The air in the office felt thick, like I was trying to breathe underwater. I remember picking up the prenatal screening report again, running my thumb over the sterile paper, the cold, hard fact staring back at me. Male fetus, Daniel Hayes, Sarah, my wife. The words blurred, then sharpened into a new, horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about a hidden account or an affair. This was about a baby. Our baby, in a twisted, incomprehensible way, was being carried by another woman, with another man listed as the father. The sheer audacity of it, the intricate web of deceit. It was staggering. I felt a surge of something akin to morbid fascination, a desperate need to see the whole picture, no matter how ugly. I rifled through the rest of the manila folder, my movements becoming more frantic, less deliberate. There had to be more. There had to be a reason, a context, something that could make this make sense. Beneath the prenatal report, I found a slim, plain white envelope. No return address, just Sarah's name and her home address, typed in a standard font. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't from Evergreen Wealth Management.
This was from Sarah to herself at home. Why would she mail herself something? Unless it was to keep it separate, to hide it even from herself in the midst of her meticulously organized life. I slid it open with a trembling finger. Inside, it wasn't a letter or a document. It was a single photograph, a Polaroid. The image was slightly faded, the colors a little washed out, but the content was starkly clear. It was Sarah, younger, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, standing beside Daniel Hayes. They were both smiling, a genuine, relaxed kind of smile that felt entirely out of place with the clinical documents surrounding it. Sarah's arm was casually draped around his shoulders, and his hand rested lightly on her waist. They looked comfortable, intimate. They looked like a couple. But it wasn't just that. In Daniel Hayes' free hand, he was holding up a sonogram picture, a tiny, blurry image of a baby. And Sarah was leaning in, her head tilted, a soft, dreamy expression on her face as she looked at it. Beneath the photo, in Sarah's handwriting, a single word: hope. Hope. The word felt like a cruel joke. What hope was she clinging to? The hope of a life with him? The hope of raising this child with him? While I was here, in our house, eating the dinners she'd meticulously planned, sleeping in the bed we'd shared for 12 years, believing in a life that was apparently a carefully constructed facade. The picture felt like physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. It wasn't just a dalliance, it was a parallel existence. A complete, thriving, loving, alternative life. I crumpled the photo in my fist, the edges digging into my palm. Anger, hot and sharp, began to burn through the fog of shock and confusion. How dare she? How dare she build this secret world, this future, and keep me in the dark? I looked around the office again, the neat stacks of paper, the organized desk, the framed photos of our life. It all felt tainted, a stage set for a play I didn't know I was a part of, playing a role I hadn't auditioned for. My mind flashed back to a conversation a few months ago. Sarah had been distant, preoccupied. I'd asked her what was wrong and she just brushed it off, saying it was stress from work. She'd even mentioned feeling a little unwell, attributing it to a bug going around the office. I'd made her soup, bought her medicine, tried to take care of her. And all the while, she was carrying his child. A wave of nausea washed over me. I could almost feel the phantom weight of a baby in my arms.
A baby I would never hold. A baby that was rightfully mine in the eyes of the world, but belonged to someone else entirely. The betrayal wasn't just a breach of trust. It was an erasure. An erasure of me, of our marriage, of our future. I pulled out my phone again, my fingers flying across the screen, a new urgency propelling me. I needed to find out everything I could about Daniel Hayes.
The LinkedIn profile was a start, but it was curated, professional. I needed to dig deeper. I searched his name, adding Sterling Corp and Jessica Hayes to the search terms. The results were a flood, but one particular link caught my eye, a local news article from about a year ago. It was a feature piece on community leaders. And there, smiling out from the grainy image, was Daniel Hayes holding his 2 young daughters. Beside him stood Jessica Hayes, a beautiful woman with kind eyes, her arm around his waist. The caption read, "Daniel Hayes, project manager at Sterling Corp, with his wife Jessica and daughters Emily and Chloe, volunteers at the local food bank." My breath hitched. This was the life he was living, a life that Sarah had intruded upon. But what was her role? Was she a mistress, a secret lover, or something else entirely? The photo, the trust fund, the prenatal report, it all suggested a deep, ongoing connection. I scrolled through the article looking for any hint of a scandal, any whisper of an affair. There was nothing, just a picture of a happy, seemingly ordinary family. Then my gaze fell on a small detail in the background of the photograph. Tucked away on a shelf in the background of the food bank office, almost out of focus, was a small framed picture. I zoomed in, my heart pounding. It was another sonogram, the same blurry image from the Polaroid Sarah had kept. It was undeniable proof that Daniel Hayes had known about this child, or at least about Sarah's pregnancy, for a long time. This changed everything. It meant Daniel wasn't just some unsuspecting victim. He was complicit. He was aware of Sarah's pregnancy with his child, and he was still maintaining his life with his wife and daughters. My mind reeled. How did this even happen? Was Sarah the aggressor? Was Daniel swept away by something he couldn't control? Or were they both fully aware, fully invested in this deception? The thought of Sarah orchestrating this, of deliberately weaving herself into the fabric of another man's life, while I remained blissfully ignorant, was a fresh twist of the knife. I felt a cold fury begin to set in, a controlled rage that felt more potent than the initial shock. I needed to confront her. I needed to see her face when I asked her about Daniel Hayes, about their son, about the trust fund. I needed to see the carefully constructed mask crack. I stood up from Sarah's desk, my legs still a little shaky, but my resolve hardening with every beat of my heart. I walked out of the office, leaving the manila folder and the damning evidence spread across her meticulously organized desk. The house felt eerily silent, the familiar hum of our life now sounding hollow, like an empty echo chamber. I walked into the living room, the photos on the mantelpiece mocking me with their happy, unburdened smiles. Our wedding picture, Buster as a puppy, vacations, holidays. It was all a lie, a beautiful, elaborate lie. I checked my phone. It was nearly 5 p.m. Sarah usually got home around 6:30, sometimes later if she had a late meeting. But today felt different. I needed to know if she was coming home, if she was going to pretend everything was normal. I opened our text message thread. Her last message to me, sent that morning, read, "Love you. Pick up dry cleaning on your way home. See you soon." Dry cleaning, a mundane chore, a piece of our ordinary life. It felt like a taunt. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to expose her, to rip away the pretense. But another part of me, the part that still clung to the illusion of our marriage, felt a perverse sense of dread. What if she denied it? What if she spun an even more elaborate tale? Or worse, what if she confirmed it all, with a chilling calm that would shatter me completely? I paced the living room, my mind racing through scenarios. I could call her, demand an explanation right now. But that felt too impulsive, too raw. I needed time to process, to build a defense against her potential lies. I needed to be armed with more than just suspicion. I needed to be prepared for whatever she threw at me.
Then, an idea, cold and sharp, formed in my mind. I would go to her office. I would wait for her. I would confront her there, in her professional domain, where she was supposed to be in control. It felt like the only place I could possibly gain an advantage, the only place where I might be able to catch her off guard. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and a sudden, desperate urge for a drink. I needed something to steady my nerves. I drove to the nearest liquor store, my hands tight on the steering wheel. The fluorescent lights of the store felt harsh, exposing. I grabbed a bottle of good whiskey, the kind Sarah usually kept on hand for guests, the kind we'd shared on celebratory nights. Now, it felt like fuel for the coming storm. Back in the house, the silence was even more oppressive. I poured myself a generous drink, the amber liquid burning a trail down my throat. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the television, the images on the screen a blur. My mind kept replaying fragments of the documents, the photograph, the news article. Daniel Hayes, Jessica, their daughters, their son, Sarah. The words swirled, a vortex of pain and anger. I decided to go through the folder again, to reread everything, to absorb every detail. Maybe there was something I'd missed, something that would provide a clearer path forward. I returned to Sarah's office, the air still heavy with the scent of her perfume and the phantom presence of her deceit. I sat back down at her desk, the manila folder laid open before me. I reread the bank statements, tracing the flow of money. The recurring deposit was substantial, enough to ensure a comfortable life for a child. It was clear Sarah had been planning this for a long time. Then I looked at the email again, the one from Sarah to Daniel.
I know this is a lot to handle, Daniel, but I want to make sure our son has every opportunity, no matter what the future holds for us. Our son. The possessive pronoun still stung, and the phrase, no matter what the future holds for us. What did that imply? A future without me? A future where their child was their primary focus? I then picked up the Evergreen Wealth Management note again. We understand the unique circumstances. Please be assured that all arrangements are being handled with the utmost discretion as per your instructions. Unique circumstances, discretion. It all pointed to a carefully managed plan, a deliberate construction of a separate life. But what were these unique circumstances? Was it simply the fact that Sarah was married to someone else? Or was there something more complex at play? My gaze fell upon another document tucked away at the back of the folder. It was a printed email, but this one was different. It wasn't from Sarah. It was from Daniel Hayes to Sarah. The subject line was simple, update. The date was just a few weeks ago. I unfolded it, my hands trembling. The email was short. It read, Sarah, I spoke with Jessica. She's agreed to a provisional custody arrangement for our son, should the worst happen. It wasn't easy, but she understands the importance of him having a secure future, no matter what. We're both working on the legal framework with our attorneys. Keep the Evergreen account active and funded. I'll be in touch with further details regarding the trust establishment. D. Jessica had agreed to a provisional custody arrangement for their son. Jessica Hayes, Daniel's wife, knew about Sarah's pregnancy, knew about their son, and had apparently agreed to a plan that would involve her caring for this child if something happened to Sarah and Daniel? The sheer scale of this deception, the involvement of an entire other family, was almost beyond comprehension. They weren't just having an affair, they were building a co-parenting strategy with a wife who was aware of the situation. My mind reeled. Jessica knew. Daniel's wife knew about Sarah's pregnancy and their child. This wasn't just a secret Sarah was keeping from me. It was a secret she was keeping from me while Daniel was keeping secrets from his wife, albeit a shared secret with Sarah. The legal framework, the attorneys, the provisional custody arrangement, this was all happening while I was oblivious, while I was living my life, believing in Sarah, believing in our marriage. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage, not just at Sarah, but at Daniel, and even in a twisted way at Jessica for agreeing to this. How could they all be so calculating, so organized in their deceit? I looked at the photo of Sarah and Daniel again, smiling at the sonogram. It wasn't just hope, it was a pact, a conspiracy, and I was the unwitting mark. My hands were shaking violently now.
I had to see Sarah. I had to confront her.
The thought of waiting until she got home felt unbearable. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 4 p.m. Sarah's office was only about 20 minutes away. I could be there soon. I stood up, the whiskey bottle still on the desk. I left it untouched. I needed a clear head, if that was even possible anymore. I walked out of Sarah's office, the manila folder clutched in my hand, a weapon of truth. As I stepped out of the house and into the late afternoon sun, the quiet suburban streets suddenly felt alien, a stage set for a drama I was only just beginning to understand. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, it was a brutal, undeniable reality, and the next act was about to begin. The drive to Sarah's office felt like an eternity, each mile a step closer to an unavoidable confrontation that I was terrified of, yet desperately, morbidly needed to happen. The carefully constructed normalcy of my life had been irrevocably shattered, and I was walking into the wreckage, armed with nothing but the fragments of a truth I never wanted to uncover. What would she say? What would she do? Would she break down? Deny everything? Or would she meet my gaze with the same chilling calm I suspected Daniel Hayes possessed? The uncertainty was a tightening knot in my chest, a prelude to an explosion I couldn't predict, but knew was coming. The sterile fluorescent lights of Sterling Corp's lobby hummed a low, indifferent tune as I stood there, the manila folder a lead weight in my hands. It was 4:20 p.m. Sarah's car wasn't in its usual spot in the employee lot, so she must be in a meeting, or maybe she'd left early and I just missed her. A cold dread, the kind that settles deep in your gut and chills you to the bone, told me she hadn't. She wouldn't. Not today. Not after what I'd found. The receptionist, a young woman with bright artificial nails and an even more artificial smile, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she chirped, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. I took a breath, trying to keep my voice steady, to project an air of casual inquiry, not the unraveling mess I felt inside. "Hi, I'm looking for Sarah Hayes. Is she around?" I asked, my own name feeling like a foreign object on my tongue. The receptionist tapped away at her keyboard, her smile never faltering. "Sarah Hayes, let me check her calendar for you. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, the word a little sharper than I intended. "But I'm her husband. It's important." I watched her face for any flicker of recognition, any hint that she knew something. There was nothing, just the polite, professional mask. "One moment, please," she said, her fingers flying again. After a beat, she looked up, her smile finally softening into something almost sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. Sarah has a late meeting scheduled until 5:30 today. She won't be available before then." 5:30. Another hour and a half of this agonizing waiting.
An hour and a half for my mind to churn, to replay every single piece of evidence, to concoct every possible scenario. I could feel my jaw clench. "Okay," I managed, my voice rough. "Thanks." I turned away, needing to get out of the sterile glare of the lobby. I found a vacant conference room on the floor, a glass-walled box that felt both exposed and surprisingly private. I sat down at the long, polished table, the manila folder still in my grip. I opened it again, my eyes scanning the documents, searching for something, anything, that would make sense of this insanity. The email from Daniel Hayes replayed in my head, his words echoing in the sterile silence. "Jessica has agreed to a provisional custody arrangement for our son, should the worst happen." The worst. What was the worst? Sarah dying? Me finding out and leaving? The thought of Jessica, his wife, being prepared to take on another woman's child, a child conceived in an affair, made my stomach churn. It was a level of control, of calculated acceptance that was almost terrifying. They were building a contingency plan for their illegitimate son. They were strategizing. And I was just collateral damage. I looked at the photo of Sarah and Daniel again, the Polaroid, a stark contrast to the cold, hard facts of the documents. They looked so happy, so at ease with each other. That was the real betrayal, wasn't it? Not just the physical act, not just the lies, but the fact that she had built a life, a future, a family.
with someone else, and had been so utterly capable of compartmentalizing it, of living two lives simultaneously without any apparent remorse or hesitation. My phone buzzed, startling me. A text from Sarah. My heart leaped into my throat, a desperate, foolish hope surfacing. Still stuck in this meeting. Don't wait up for me. Love you. The casual affection, the dismissive instruction to not wait up, it was like a physical blow. She knew. She had to know I was on to her. Was this a tactic? A way to delay the inevitable? Or was she genuinely still in a meeting, blissfully unaware that her entire world was about to implode? The latter felt impossible. The unique circumstances were hardly unique anymore, not now that I held the proof in my hands. I decided to call her. My finger hovered over her contact, then moved to her work number. I needed to hear her voice, to gauge her reaction before I laid it all out. The phone rang, each ring a hammer blow against my fraying nerves. Finally, a click. Sarah Hayes speaking. Her voice was cool, professional, the same tone she used with clients. It sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. Sarah, I said, my voice a strained whisper. It's me. A beat of silence. Then her voice shifted, just a fraction. A hint of, what? Concern? Fear? Honey, what is it? You sound? I'm at Sterling Corp, I interrupted, cutting her off. In one of the conference rooms. I found your office, and I found everything.
The words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear her mind racing, piecing together the puzzle, realizing the game was up. Found everything? Her voice was a mere breath, laced with a tension that confirmed my suspicions. Yes, Sarah. The Evergreen account, the trust fund, Daniel Hayes, the prenatal reports, the photo, the email from him, the one where his wife agrees to raise our son. I spat the words out, each syllable dripping with the poison of betrayal. Silence. A profound, suffocating silence that stretched for an eternity. I could feel the adrenaline surging through me, a desperate need for her to say something, anything, to break this agonizing quiet. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible, stripped of all pretense, all artifice. Oh God. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated despair. Oh, God is right, I said, my own voice shaking. Who is he, Sarah? And who is our son? And why, for God's sake, is Daniel Hayes' wife agreeing to raise him? The questions tumbled out, a torrent of pain and confusion. It's complicated, she finally whispered. Complicated. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Complicated as finding a stray sock. This is a whole other universe, Sarah. A universe you built without me. A universe where you're having a child with another man and his wife is involved? How did this happen? Tell me how my wife ended up pregnant with another man's child, a child she's planning to raise with him and his wife? All while I'm here, eating dinner, sleeping next to her, believing in our life. Her breath hitched. I didn't plan for any of this to happen, not like this. Then how did it happen, Sarah? Did he just fall into your lap? Did you wake up one day and decide to become a surrogate for your lover's child with his wife's consent? My anger was a raging inferno now, consuming everything in its path. It wasn't like that, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Daniel and I, we had a history, years ago, before you. It was brief, but we always stayed in touch. And then about a year and a half ago, I was going through a really tough time. Work was overwhelming, and you were so focused on your own projects. And I felt so alone. And he reached out, just to check in. And we started talking again. And then, one thing led to another. So, you had an affair, and you got pregnant. And he knew, and his wife knew, and I didn't. The words were simple, brutal. Yes,
she choked out. Daniel was terrified. He loved Jessica. He loves his daughters. He didn't want to ruin his family. But he also felt responsible for me and for the baby. And Jessica, she's incredibly strong and pragmatic. She knew about us, about me. She found out about the pregnancy. And instead of just leaving him, she proposed a solution, a way to protect Daniel and his daughters and still ensure the baby had a secure future.
She's incredibly charitable, always has been. She said she'd been wanting another child, a way to extend their family in a different way, and she saw this as an opportunity in a twisted way, to have a child who would be loved and cared for without the usual complications. Usual complications? I echoed, incredulous. You mean like having a wife who doesn't know her husband is knocking up another woman and planning to raise the kid with her? Because that sounds like a pretty major complication, Sarah. I know it sounds insane, but they have a very unconventional relationship, and Jessica she's remarkably selfless in her own way. She wanted to make sure the child was cared for, that he had a stable home. And Daniel, he was so torn. He didn't want to abandon me or the baby, and I didn't want to be alone. I felt so lost, so unmoored, and the thought of having a child who would be mine, entirely mine, if Daniel and Jessica couldn't step in, it was a lifeline. A lifeline, I repeated, my voice laced with a bitter irony. So you were planning to raise a child with another man, with his wife as a co-parent, and I was just the oblivious husband, paying the bills, living in the dark? And when you got pregnant, you didn't think for 1 second about me, about our life, about the vows we took? Tears were streaming down her face now. I could hear it in her voice. I was a mess, John. I was drowning. And Daniel was the only one who understood, who didn't judge me. And Jessica, she was so strong, so understanding. I thought this was the best way, to keep everyone safe, to ensure the baby was loved, and yes, to protect our own marriage. I was so afraid of losing you. I convinced myself that if I could just handle this, if I could just keep it all together, that you would never have to know, that we could still have our life, our home, keep us safe, by lying to me every single second of every single day, by letting me believe I was going to be a father while you were carrying another man's child. The rage was starting to morph into something colder, a deep, profound sadness. The image of Sarah crying, the sound of her broken voice, it was almost harder to bear than the anger, but it didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't undo the years of deception. I never meant to hurt you, John. I swear. I got so lost, so scared. Daniel was going to set up that trust fund for the baby, to ensure he had security no matter what. He was supposed to tell Jessica everything about how it was happening, and then they were going to make it work. But he was so afraid of her leaving him, of losing his daughters. So he told her I was carrying his child as a favor, a surrogate. He spun a story, and she agreed to help, to be there for the child. It was a way for him to keep his family intact and still be responsible for our son. A surrogate?
So now you're lying about what you're lying about. The absurdity of it all was crushing. Sarah, look at me. Really look at me. Is any of this real? Was any of our life real? John, please, she sobbed. Don't say that. Everything with us, it was real. It was my whole world. You are my world. But I made a terrible mistake. A series of terrible mistakes. I was so weak, so foolish. Weak? Foolish? Sarah, you built a secret life. You got pregnant by another man. You kept it from me. You let me think we were going to have a baby. And now I find out his wife is involved, and you're spinning stories about surrogacy? You think that's weakness? That's calculated. That's manipulative. That's a level of deceit I don't even recognize. I know it looks that way, and I can't blame you for thinking it. But I was so ashamed, so terrified of losing you. And Daniel, he was a terrible influence in a way. He offered solutions, ways to manage the fallout. He was the one who set up the Evergreen account, the one who told me to keep the prenatal records. He was the one who handled the communication with his lawyers and Jessica. So he's been orchestrating this entire thing? From the beginning? The money, the legal arrangements, the whole damn charade? Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He has. He's been incredibly organized. He saw it as a way to protect his existing family while still acknowledging his responsibility to our son. I stood up, my legs shaky, the manila folder still clutched in my hand. The glass walls of the conference room seemed to press in on me. I felt like I was suffocating. Organized, I repeated, the word a hollow echo. That's one way to put it. I call it a complete and utter demolition of everything I thought we were. John, please, we have to talk, properly, face to face. We are talking, Sarah. This is us talking. Me finding out the horrifying truth, and you confessing to a level of betrayal that I don't even know how to process. I walked out of the conference room, leaving her on the phone, alone in the sterile silence of Sterling Corp. The lobby was empty now. The receptionist was gone for the day. I walked out into the cool evening air, the city lights beginning to twinkle. The drive home was a blur. I pulled into our driveway, the house dark and quiet. It felt like a tomb. I walked in, the silence deafening. I didn't turn on any lights. I just stood in the middle of the living room, the manila folder still in my hand, a testament to the ruins of my marriage. I dropped it on the coffee table, the sound loud in the stillness. The photo of Sarah and Daniel, the sonogram, the reports, they all spilled out, a cascade of evidence. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, the side where Sarah always slept. I looked at our wedding photo on the dresser, our faces beaming, full of a future that now felt like a cruel joke.
The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I thought was carrying our child, was a stranger, a master manipulator. And the man she had turned to, the man whose child she carried, had his wife's blessing to raise him. The sheer, unadulterated insanity of it all threatened to shatter me completely. I thought about the baby, our baby, or rather Daniel's and Sarah's baby, a son. He would never know me as his father. He would grow up in a life I had no part in, with parents I barely understood. And I would be left with the ghost of a family, the phantom limb of a child I would never hold. I reached for my phone, my fingers numb. I scrolled through my contacts, past Sarah's name, past Daniel Hayes' name. I hadn't even looked him up on my phone. I didn't want to see his face. Past Jessica Hayes' name, a phantom I now had to reckon with. I hesitated, then opened my contacts and began to type a new name. It was a name I hadn't thought about in years, a name that represented a life before Sarah, a simpler life, a life I had willingly left behind for her. I typed the name, then deleted it. No, I couldn't go back. Not yet. I sat there in the dark, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me, suffocating me. There was no grand reckoning, no fiery catharsis, just the quiet, crushing realization that everything I thought I knew was a lie. The life I had lived, the future I had envisioned, it had all been a carefully constructed illusion, and the architect was the woman I loved. The air in the room was thick with the ghosts of their secrets, their lies, their shared future that I was never meant to be a part of. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt utterly, completely alone. The silence stretched on, a vast, empty expanse where my life used to be. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the faintest hint of dawn began to break through the darkness. Not a hopeful dawn, not a new beginning, but simply the relentless, unforgiving progression of time,
forcing me to face the wreckage and figure out how to survive it.